everyone, and welcome to this session, this webinar that I was really looking forward to. And I think that Bob and I, if not similarly, but not equally, but at least similarly, we wanted to have it together with you, Frank Mattes. A very warm welcome to you. And maybe to the ones who don't know, however, to not know Frank Mattes is a system architect for corporate growth beyond core. And I mean, this is for every corporate, it is so essential. And Frank is one of the very few who has built what most companies still chase but rarely catch, a practical way to align innovation, business units, and leadership to build growth beyond core together. He created the Lean Scaleup framework used by Fortune 2000 companies such as BP, Scania, Amadeus to build new businesses. And his book, by the way, where he got the support from more than 100 corporate practitioners and academic experts, and Bob is one of them.
Exactly.
Him also. He, in his recent book, Now and You, he shows how company can achieve this, meaning building new businesses. And with his triple win growth system, that helps corporates create the infrastructure to make new growth work when politics, silos, risk aversion threaten to kill the momentum. And for the ones who come from corporate, we know that this is daily things which happen and which you have to deal with. And with more than 20 decades of experience across 20 plus industries, Frank advises CxOs and corporate innovation leaders on how to turn the boardroom ambition into market traction with clarity, speed, and momentum that last. A very warm welcome, Frank. And yes.
Thanks again for having me, but actually we'll just do 2 decades, not 20 decades.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, then you would have, yes, good point. Good catch.
So indeed, welcome, Frank. But before we really start having a nice conversation, a little bit of some explanation about the format. We first will have a nice number of discussions by questions with Frank. Takes about 30 minutes maybe. But in the meantime, if you have some questions, please drop them in the chat. We will make some time to answer them. And if we're not able to do it during the session, we'll certainly reach out to you and answer them afterwards. But yeah, let's start with a nice conversation. As Catherine mentioned, actually, Frank, we have been interacting quite a number of times in the past by the co-creation of Now and You. It has been published about a year ago, the book. And I was just wondering what has changed in how companies approach currently the corporate innovation, and what insights and feedbacks actually did you get that actually changed your mind? What would you like to have included in the book with your insights you have right now to actually improve it? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah. So, Bob, what you and I and 99 more corporate practitioners and academic worked out was basically in the spirit, let's build new businesses, right? So could be an adjacent or could be the real moonshot, somewhere in between, right? And we said, well, it requires to rethink how now, meaning the existing system, the day-to-day business, short-term driven, process-driven, risk-averse, could play together with the new longer-term perspective, agile work style, etc. And we found that there are a dozen success factors, and we ended up to make it a punchy one-liner with the thesis. Many people say that innovation doesn't work because it doesn't scale. Right, they can speak about innovation theater, but we found it's the other way around. Innovation doesn't scale because now is not prepared for letting it scale up. So that was mid-24, as you said. What surprised me and what really also shaped my thinking and the work that I'm doing in advisory services, so it's not large-scale projects, but rather small teams or even one-on-one discussions, is the speed with which the appetite for these out-of-the-box new businesses went down. So low risk aversity, get closer to core. Many innovation centers have been shut down or repositioned to a new role. And what really also touched me by the heart is when I spoke with the leaders of these innovation centers, many said we didn't see the signs coming. We see them now in retrospect, how the landscape has shifted, right, towards what I say, a new role for innovation in a changed business context, but it wasn't apparent in the initial run. So I'm thinking about the environment has changed, right? Because the risk appetite has gone down, and that traces back to the overall company goals that are much more on preserving core and delivering a really predictable and reliable growth trajectory instead of big promises, right? Because interest rates have gone up and investors are thinking harder if they should invest into a company that says, trust us, in 10 years, everything will be great.
Mhm.
They should invest their company, their money somewhere else.
Mhm. Isn't it interesting how recognizing what Rita McGrath calls leading signals
Mhm.
is really sometimes difficult to catch,
Yeah.
especially when you are in the day-to-day business. And what I hear is that corporate is focusing again more on core.
Yes.
And there is definitely the risk avertness also being there, because simply there are so many factors of uncertainty which are difficult to manage. But I have a further question on that. What have you learned about the system problem of scaling innovation, and how can leaders better understand the psychological drivers that make or break the C-suite buy-in, especially in these times? I think it is still very important to continue to keep the mindset of innovation. How can we make things better? How can we be closer to our customers and work with them? How can you approach that?
Mhm. So to make one point clear, but I think the three of us are aligned on that, innovation is not dead. It's playing out in a different corporate context, right? I typically say the new headline is growth. So let's downplay a little bit the title innovation, and let's think more on what the original idea behind innovation was, closing growth gaps in here. So growth is the headline. Maybe I can spend one more sentence on the Rita McGrath comment that you made, Catherine. Yes. What I find in discussions with corporate practitioners like you are, Bob, like you are, is they thought they had a kind of contract. When money was cheap after the financial crisis 2008 and 9, interest rates were at 0%, right? There was a kind of understanding that there's a contract, right? So businesses, they bring in the margins to keep the shareholders happy. They also fund the search for the new. And when something material comes out of that, leadership backs what needs to be backed. This is where corporate innovators thought that this was a contract. It turns out it was a kind of pseudo-alignment in my view. And coming from that perspective, we do have a contract, and our mission is to look for the new and only for the new. Let the business units take care of the present and the near-term future. right? They maybe have lost the sensitivity for actively monitoring the internal signals. So for instance, when I was starting to work on how to reorient an innovation unit in a new corporate context, the chief innovation officer said to me, Frank, if I'm honest, our teams, they learn to listen very closely to external customers, right? What is the journey? What are the pains and the gains and the value proposition and all that stuff? But we kind of neglected listening to our internal customers. So we might be need to learn again how to listen to those internal customers, right?
Mhm.
But coming back to the question that you just asked, what I also refined my thinking in the last 12 months or so is to say, Bob, you recall when we said there are 3 big headlines where we could organize what needs to be done to design that interface between now and you. It's leadership, right? It's process methodology, process meaning end-to-end from search fields to scaled up businesses. Methodology meaning all the decisions that you need to make, like for instance, do we scale up internally or externally, this kind of things. And it's about people and culture in here. So broadly, we can say there's some hardware stuff in here, like goals, KPIs, incentives, and there's some software stuff in here, leadership's mindset, people, culture, collaboration. What surprised me, at least that's my take on last 12 months, is the hardware, the goals, the KPIs, incentives are in reality much more important than the software, because the hardware shapes people behaviors. When in doubt, they would look at what is expected from me, what are the goals, what are the KPIs, and adjust accordingly. So that reminds me, Catherine, when I started in this out-of-the-box thing, beginning of the 2010s, in a space that they call these days open innovation, I only learned after 2-3 years that you cannot crack the code on how to make a company more open from at a philosophical level, right? There's so much out there, so many startups, so many brilliant ideas. You have to showcase it and tie it to real business challenges, right? So here's a challenge, there's a startup, why don't you two get along with each other? So my piece of advice would really look at the hard factors of the system that people are working in, goals, KPIs, incentive structure, and from there start to work on how do we accommodate the mindset and the culture in that context.
Very interesting. And I do recognize also what you referred to for the contract. There was this feeling, yeah, we really have this contract present. And also, you say listening, call it sensing. It was a lot of focus on the external market,
Yeah.
but you also really make it clear, also look at much more also in the internal market, so to say, internally in the organization, what are really the needs and can you actually meet them? And therefore be much more not only on the gut feelings, but really hard metrics, is to say how we can do that. Still, if you come up with a new idea, about only 3% of these initiatives, normally they are successful. So there's a nice validation, but then if you want to scale it up, it still fails. Is that then also related to the validation and the growth, that what you just mentioned, these hard metrics also become more important, or is there something else in play?
Yeah, so I mean, when we did the math, Bob, in creating the book, we said, well, how big is the problem, right? That was the question. We ended up with that 3%. Where does this come from? Now, several studies from large consulting companies said that the chances for a large company to create a product that hits the market from an idea are not much better than startups, right? 10-12% success rate, meaning 1 out of 8, 1 out of 10 make it to the market. Keep in mind that hitting the market in a corporate setting has some consequences. Think about regulatory compliance and safety and design and brand guidelines, etc., etc. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes when we speak about this 10 to 12% success rate. McKinsey then made a follow-up study said, okay, let's look at the one product that made it to market, and let's look at the business that this product had been created. How large did it become? And they said it's a 50 million threshold, right? Because then at a typical Fortune 2000 company, it shows up on the balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
So that's where they said it. But then the success rate after product launch to become a $50 million business is just 19%. So that's when we move away from core, meaning real adjacent stuff, right? New product line with new customer groups, etc. Or you really start to create a data-driven business model on top of what you have on the product side. If we get closer to core, Bob, the chances will be higher. I did not see up so far any study by how much higher, but per se, I would say it's much higher than just 3%. But obviously the exponential growth expectations are not there anymore.
Probably you can relate it more to transition of transformation projects, which are happening continuously, and those numbers you can probably use to reflect on it. But you just mentioned a success rate.
Yeah.
We have a question from someone you know, Frank, Nida Nordin. And I'm going to show you, as a follow-up on the KPIs, Nida's question about culture should come from KPIs.
Yep. Hi, Nida. Thanks for spending the time with us. No, thanks for doubling down on that. What I'm saying is, if you really want to find your way through the organization, then you need to have in my view, a much closer look at what are the hard factors that shape people behaviors, shape leadership thinking, shape how corporate functions approach that kind of innovation. Then if you're going in there and basically look at it primarily from a culture approach, people might second the arguments that you want to make in the workshop when you have a lot of post-its or Miro board these days, right? But when they go back in their functions, right, at the end of the day, it's their annual goals and their KPIs that will tell them, I would want to support this, but I'm not able to do that. So the way it's the lagom thing, as the Swedish say, right? It's the consensus that you need to shape between the now and the new.
If we come back to the triple win, which ecosystem models and talent mindset have you found most powerful, and where should companies focus to de-risk scale-ups?
Good question. First of all, for those who are not following me so closely on LinkedIn, what I try to condense out of the advisory work of the last 12, maybe even starting 18 months ago, when it became more and more apparent to me that innovation has a new role in a changed corporate business environment, my fundamental thesis is there is a new contract waiting, but it needs to be designed. Needs to be shaped properly, and it's not about that let's make a dent in the universe and go well beyond core, but it's basically supporting the business. It's closer to core short term, and the triple win means, if we look at it in a triangle between the C-suite, the businesses, and the innovation in that change corporate context, there needs to be win everywhere. Actually, in the thinking model that I developed it's a system of gives and gets. So you give something, every party, every one of these three parties, and in return they get something. So just for one example, if you're a business unit head, in order to secure the growth that you promised, that sits in growth initiatives and maybe some 2 to 3 year challenges, if you want to de-risk that, if you want to bring in more certainty about delivering these growth figures, it makes a lot of sense to invite people that have, by training and by their mindset, the view on what are the assumptions, how can we test the assumptions, how do we de-risk the whole thing, meaning the innovators, right? So they give some of their autonomy, if you will, and in turn they get a more predictable growth pipeline. So that's the triple win. I mean, there were 3 points, if I recall, Catherine. The ecosystem models, I mean, venture clienting is, at least in Europe, creating a lot of traction.
Yes.
Defined business problems where you look for a startup that really fits like lock and key in here, solving that, and if it works out, the POC works out, then scale it. I also see cross-corporate consortia in, say, things in innovation areas, let's call it like that, like digital trust or e-mobility, where several incumbents say this is our shared interest, and we'll find some ways to work together in that space, respecting obviously the regulatory requirement that you need to have, and IP protection. Talent mindsets. If we want to build that triple win, I would say you need to have some sort of ambidextrous translators. People that can wear what I call red shirts and blue shirts at the same time. Red shirts are the folks who work in the red oceans in the day-to-day business. Blue shirts are the ones who are looking for blue oceans. And you also need to have some sort of credible insiders in the operative business. If we're honest, corporate innovators, Bob, happy to hear your view. There was a kind of, let's call it, certain distance in here, and not a very close embrace between operative businesses and innovation in the past years. And de-risking the things that have proven their value, scaling up, I would say you're well advised, if you're a corporate innovator in this new corporate context, if you really align with business unit value. The things that they are measured upon, meaning top line, bottom line, and also maybe arrange a system where where you share incentives so that the business unit heads also benefit from the uptake, and are not so much punished, or if the downside, meaning the risk, materializes.
I do indeed recognize a lot what you just reflect on, Frank. In the past, you saw as innovation, it looked like it was this separate unit trying to be a speedboat, trying to do as many things, and maybe you were lucky to have something really beneficial. Now you see indeed the change towards more helping the current organization to actually become better. And a lot of times the word growth is being used in that perspective. And that most of the times relates to people thinking it's a financial growth. But as it's also a topic that is very dear to Catherine and me, think about sustainability as well as circularity. Do you also see innovation supporting that those areas more? That growth is seen more as just financial means, but also value in general? You were referring to e-commerce or e-transportation
E-mobility.
shortly. Is this also something you see more and more appearing?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't think, Bob, that it will be just the existing core, right, and nothing else. I mean, there's a continuum, right? It's not black or white; it's a grayscale. The risk appetite for going beyond core is different, and if we think about, say, circular business models or sustainability, I mean, the people that are working in the now system typically have made their career in the now system, and they know the tools and the tricks of the trade of the now system. But if we explore beyond that, like for circular plays and sustainability, you need to have a different mindset, but that traces back to the innovation mandate, to the role that innovation should play in here. When there is a mandate, I think there's a natural view on who should drive it. it's innovation. But my warning sign is, let's not lose sight of what the company expects. So that should be baked in the mandate to say, this is how we support the operative businesses, and this is what we do on top of that. And we do it in a smart way. We do it with de-risking, maybe not looking at the exponential growth, but some intermediate goals that help the company in here. And by the way, I mean, Catherine, I know that your heart is beating for that. If we look at circular plays, I mean, there's an interesting thing that I noticed when looking at the German chemical industry, right? And they're working very hard on close the loop recycling in here, right? But if you dive deeper, you find that the energy requirements and the CO2 footprint of these kind of plays are not there where they should to be, but they will be there when you factor in renewable energies. So suddenly you're working with two circular plays at once.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it is an interesting point, because many corporations have already circular initiatives, on the go. It is usually making less than 5% of their total revenue. You have still, I mean, people like SSAB in Sweden, the steel company, who is now is going to shift from next year on basically their entire production to that. Hybrid, the new technology with hydrogen. So it is absolutely the combination of becoming circular. What does it mean? And then the footprint, what it requires. It is a pretty complex thing to achieve. You know what? Because we have some questions popping in.
Yeah, please,
I want to be sure that Neda asked, curious to hear about your new insights on how innovation is treated and run in the era of AI.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, I mean, Bob, as we prepared for this webinar, we also discussed what's the role of AI, right? This is in particular in our area of interest, the interplay between the now and the new. I think on the one side, it definitely will help corporate innovators in some part of the journey. I yesterday, by the way, was listening to a webinar of a cooperation partner where he said, well, we test pricing points and feature preference of customers by putting out certain A/B tests in a very smart way. And then the question also came, what about synthetic consumers, right? So AI could generate these synthetic consumers. And this gentleman said, well, he read a couple of studies already on the emerging body of knowledge in that area that at this point say it's not feasible to predict from synthetic users the actual consumer response. The gap is far too wide. So my view is, I go with that sentence by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, who said, I think with AI, but I collaborate with people. So let's stimulate the thinking. Let's come up with ideas. Let's come up with experiment plans. All good and fine. We can do this with $20 per month on a ChatGPT 5 subscription, right? But at the end of the day, we still have to think. And if we look at the underlying problems between, say, solving short-term and longer-term aspirations, Bob, my view is you can ask AI to look over the portfolio of initiatives from core inside out, maybe some innovation activities, and make some portfolio optimizations that play out in the now plus new area. But at the end of the day, it's a people business. So there are still stakeholders who need to say, we go for that, right? And probably, I think, if they're wise, they also listen to Satya Nadella. We think with AI, but we work with people. My view, Bob, how do you see it?
I completely agree with it, because many of the decisions you make is on insights, and that's based on data in general. So artificial intelligence can help you to get more insights,
Yes.
challenge yourself, etc., to get an overview. But again, it's also the incentives or the need to the market you actually should address to. And AI can predict anything, but if it's also garbage in, it's garbage out. And it's otherwise a very theoretical exercise, and you should actually really, the needs which are there, that is still a human interaction to try to find out and make logic out of it. I think that you cannot automate and
absolutely. Can I show, because I mean we are getting Mirzad, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your first name, shared that also. A well-known example of the NGO NPO is a story on events behind OpenAI Foundation and how the turn of events change the dynamics and incentive when innovation appeared to be a big change. And by the way, he has also a question with regard to, if I may show it, is how do you see this within the context of NGO NPO work? Do you see a difference?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we talk about NGO, the KPIs and the goals are somewhat different from companies that have first a commercial perspective and then put on other dimensions like ESG, DEI, etc. So it's also, I guess, if I'm not quite clear if you're basically looking at NGOs or corporate working together with NGOs. The context is different, so I wouldn't say it's identical, not at all. I mean, Bob, that was also one of the points that we worked out in as we co-created the book. The corporate context needs to be considered. Such a great idea or corporate startup or corporate scale-up does not operate in a vacuum. No, not at all, right? There's governance, there's funding, etc. Everything is in there. So I hope I got this question right, Mirzad.
But do you want to take the next question before we then move slowly towards wrapping up?
Yeah. If innovators face a two-front war, external markets and internal bureaucracy, what leadership action tips do you have to actually to take the balance? What are the ruthless questions you actually should ask every CEO before greenlighting on a new bet?
So when we worked on that now and you, how could we design an interface between the existing business and the emerging business? Let's put it that way. We said, right, 3 big headlines: leadership, methodology, and people and culture. So let's look at the leadership. And in the leadership part, we found that there's some hard stuff in here, like performance management. How do you measure a well-oiled running existing business versus one that just starts to get traction, structure, governance, etc., these areas. But we also identified, and herein I see the answer to that question, two aspects that are more, they're not so hard, let's put it that way, in the sense of quantitative. The one is leadership's skin in the game. And the other one was the one company mindset. So what we learned in the discussions, Bob, if I recall, is that asking for a C-suite sponsorship is not enough, right? Because it's rather easy to give, but when the next crisis comes, or the next big issue that requires management attention, right, you're left in the cold. So that's why we went further and say we need to see skin in the game. They put their reputation on the line. They put their time on the line. They do whatever they can do to nudge the existing system and the now system to make it happen. And this is really skin in the game, right? And I mean, what I also learned, one of the things, Bob, on a very different level is, I mean, we spent some time working through how could that corporate context be implemented when we think about validation, right? So there's a lot of validation theory out there, but now if we want to factor in that corporate context. How do we do that, right? And came up with 30 or so thinking tools, all good and fine. What I found in the last 12 months is companies are asking for the 3 or 5 must-have tools, right? The rest is, so to say, nice to have or should have. And what I found a broad consensus is that the skin in the game concept is paramount, both internally, how much do people really put their skin into the game, as well as externally, right? Are there potential customers that say, yes, we will put in resources and co-create the MVP with you? And for instance, one of my clients says, when we in our initiatives discuss or find that there is no skin in the game from business unit heads anymore, we stop, period. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We just don't keep on playing and more experiments. There are so many ways to keep ourselves busy. No, we stop. It's mandatory. And the second piece, maybe, Bob, would be, I'll call it the one company mindset. I mean, the paramount example, that's a case study also in the book, is 2 companies, same size, same industry, same challenge. One goes bankrupt, the other one prospers, right? I'm talking about Kodak and Fujifilm. And when we looked into the story, what made Fujifilm survive and Kodak bankrupt, it was that the CEO really made sure that the whole organization understood it's not the now and the new, it's one company. We are working together to win the now and to create the future, right? So he asked, if you may recall, his top 1,000 people to say, write me a 2-page memo. What stands behind, between us and the future company that we want to build, right? And then he learned and implemented. So skin in the game and one company mindset, I would say.
I love what you said. I mean, I don't even have to, well, I'm going to repeat it because it needs, to sink in. Skin in the game, absolutely, and mindset, the company's mindset. And I think that there are so many stark examples out there where you see where similar companies went this route and the other one this one, a successful one, and we can only learn from it. So as we wrap up, because I'm looking at the time, what is the one idea or the one takeaway you'd like leaders to carry forward, especially about how growth, resilience, and let me call it system thinking, regenerative thinking, circular thinking, or thinking in general, shape the legacy they leave behind?
So I would say, if I have in mind, Catherine, the business unit heads, $2-3 billion businesses, or the CxOs that I work with, if I should put it in one phrase, is to say, well, the legacy that you build is not only measured by the growth you achieve, but also by the resilience you instill and the systems that you create, right? Growth without resilience collapses under pressure.
Yeah.
Think about supply chain disruptions and pandemic area. Resilience without regeneration just locks in the now, right? And regeneration without growth will not find shareholder acceptance. So I think it's a 3-legged stool, right? You need all those 3 legs. And maybe, but there are more senior managers that are more quantitative driven, senior managers that are more mission driven. For the latter ones, I say, well, maybe your guideline should be to create the conditions so that the ones that come after you can succeed and succeed even more easily.
Yes. I find that really important because, as you said, I mean, it is also to build, it's not only to build growth, but also resilience.
Yes.
And you said earlier, skin in the game. And skin in the game also for the leadership means to know when to bring people in that have a completely different mindset so that you can bring the company to into another direction too, or that you can explore that. And so I mean, Frank, thank you so much. That was, I'm always learning with you, and also the talks we have together with Bob and you. And thank you so much for your time. And also to our audience, thank you so much for your questions. If you have some additional questions, please put them in the link in the comments of the webinar so that everyone can benefit from Frank's responses or ours. And definitely, if please go ahead, contact and talk to Frank. And thank you also to the Value Department for hosting this webinar.
Thanks for having me, Catherine and Bob, and thank you also for the audience for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.